This video will deal with the project initiation process in project management. In other words, we'll look at the very start of projects and how project management will deal with how projects are set up, what are the requirements to get a successful project going, and what are the issues that the project management team will confront and how they will deal with these. So we're at the initiation process, right at the very start. And in this context, we start with looking at the project scope. We'll deal with project charter elsewhere in these classes, but suffice it to say that the charter is what, in a sense, authorizes the project. In other words, this is what the management deem as necessary, but they also specify the limits of what can be done and how it should be done. So it's much more, in a sense, macro statement about the project, the budgets and how the budget should not be exceeded, and the time scale and who will be responsible, and so it sets out the framework. But there's also a scope statement which is much more detailed about when the project will start, how it will run, who will look after what. It itemizes everything in the project, and we're going to focus in more on this in this session. So initiation is the formal starting process of a project authorization. So the initiation is right at the start, as the word suggests. It's the initial, it's at the beginning. The process is the first part of the project lifecycle and involves all activities concerning pre-planning and conception activities. In other words, it's looking at everything, looking at the resources, looking at the ability of the team to set it up and to run it effectively. It looks at the skills and aptitudes of the team and who's going to manage it, the timescale, the budget, as I said, the deliverables, the monitoring process. It looks at everything. It looks at all of the issues, and it makes sure that there is going to be an outcome. It makes sure that there will be control throughout, which will enable the management to see the outcome emerge. In other words, this project will not be started and just be forgotten about. This one will be brought to a successful conclusion. The initiation process establishes a foundation for effective planning, management, monitoring and control. So it's planned in detail, it's managed, and then it's monitored carefully, and it's controlled. So it does come to a conclusion. It comes to the end as anticipated. Now, what is project scoping? Well, project scoping is the process of defining the key project processes and purposes. In any project, there must be key issues that must be addressed. The project scoping statement must identify those. These are the ones that must be completed. It sets out the sequence of events, the sequence that must be followed, and it talks about the milestones, where they've got to in terms of what has to be achieved before they move on. In other words, it's a detailed plan showing the progression from start to finish. The scope provides an outline and boundaries of the project, the goals, the key responsibilities, procedures, deliverables, project approval and verification, right from the start, as I said, to the end. It talks about the goals, who's responsible for each part of the project, how it's going to be done, and how the management know that each part has been completed successfully and properly. What are, in other words, the deliverables at each stage? And the project approval, who signs it off, and the verification, the checking process at the end to make sure that it has achieved what it set out to do. A statement which discusses the benefits of the project to the organization. essentially that's what the scoping statement is. It sets out the benefits of the project to the organization, but it also sets out in detail how it's going to be done. Now let's talk more about the project scope statement. Identifying a project mission, goals and deliverables. So the project scope statement identifies the project mission, goals and deliverables. It identifies why it's there, why the project has been set up, what it's trying to achieve, what its goals are, and how we know the goals have been met. What are the deliverables? Project constraints, the availability of resources, finances, time and quality standards. These must be explicitly recognized in the scope statement. There must be clear understanding that the project will have limits in terms of finance, resourcing, time, staff availability and so on. It should be clearly set out what the limits of the project are, and then some assessment be made if whether the project is feasible given the resource constraints, all of the different types of resources. Given those constraints, can the project be delivered? And to that end, a meeting of experts, a meeting of relevant managers and technicians and senior management and anyone who is deemed to be knowledgeable and should be involved in the project, a meeting of those people should be called and some assessment made as to whether the project should be initiated or not. Outline the project focus and scope. Do all project members understand and are committed to the project? Make sure that the members understand it completely. Make sure that they are committed. They believe it can be done. They believe it is a good idea. Now, project scoping is the process of defining the key project processes and purpose. In other words, look at the project and look at what are the key project processes, what absolutely must be done, what's essential. The scope provides an outline and boundaries of the project, the goals, the key responsibilities, procedures, deliverables, project approval and verification. In other words, it sets out exactly what is required. It breaks up the project into parts. It talks about the boundaries, what were the deliverables, what's going to be the outcome of that particular process, who's responsible for it, what was anticipated as an outcome, what was actually achieved, and who signs it off, who agrees that the project has been a success or not, and what's the criteria that that person will use. It discusses the benefits of the project to the organization. It makes sure that the organization know that the project is necessary, it's a good idea, and they want to work with it. Now, in terms of the project scope statement, we have something called the critical success factor, the CSF. What needs to be achieved for a successful project? The critical success factor. What is the key outcome that will determine whether the project is a success or a failure? What's the critical success factor? What is it about the project that we can look at and that the management can look at and say this project has failed or this project has succeeded? What is the critical success factor? Objectives. What are the objectives and how will they help achieve deliverables? In other words, look at what the project is attempting to do and see if they are reasonable, if they're realistic, and how will the objectives, the various objectives of the project, how will they subscribe and help the project achieve its deliverables? Its deliverables are its outcomes. And also risk planning. What risks are involved and how can they be identified, prevented and overcome? In most projects, virtually all projects, there are risks. Risks of failure, risks that something will go wrong, something wasn't anticipated. So look at the risks, and should something arise, then how can the project be put back on course? How can the risks be overcome, in other words? Now the charter. Well, a project charter is a formal document produced during the initiation stage. The charter summarizes the project and the project scope statement and communicates the project details to the stakeholders. In other words, the project's charter is the document that is telling the various stakeholders exactly what's involved, how it's proposed to be carried out, what the outcomes or deliverables should be, and what are the resources required, what are the risks, and how will the whole project be set up and run. So it's organized as a clear statement, not as I've just presented it just now, in terms of just talking about it, but it's presented as a clear statement on paper under different headings, so that the various stakeholders, management, customers, or whoever's involved, can read it and understand precisely what the project will be and how it will be carried out. The charter is the formal documentation that give the project meaning, status and acknowledgement. So the charter is what approves the project. The scope is talking about the processes, the details, how it will be done, what's required, who will do it, what the outcomes will be, and so on. The charter is what approves the project. The charter is validating the project. It's setting it up. It's giving it authority to run. Now the project charter layout. Well, in the project charter layout we'll have the purpose of the project. What is the purpose? What's it trying to do? The objectives, the key deliverables the project will achieve. Clearly the charter must state what they hope will be the outcomes. And what outcomes will be expected? What are the results? What's it aiming to achieve? And then who are the customers or the clients, and how will they judge the project outcomes? So the project must be aimed at someone, perhaps at customers, or aimed at the organization in terms of improving the efficiency of the organization. So it doesn't matter if the customers are external or internal, the customers must see the benefits of the project. And certainly when the project is completed, there must be benefits accruing to whoever commissioned it and whoever agreed to it. Then who will sponsor the project? In other words, what people, what managers will put their name to the project? In other words, the managers have belief in the project. They believe that it's a good idea and they should therefore sign up to the project. They should recommend the project, approve the project. Who are the various stakeholders? Well, it could be the managers, the project manager who's involved, parts of the team, the customers clearly are involved, shareholders may be involved, may be consulted, other budget holders and other managers who may have to release resources to enable the project to happen. So there's a wide range of stakeholders and they should be identified and their contribution recognized as well. Then state specific deliverables that are to be achieved. In other words, what are the outcomes precisely? What can be expected from the project? It may be that there's going to be one deliverable, one outcome at the end of the project, or it could be that there are going to be various deliverables throughout the life of the project that the stakeholders can see. But these should be specified. Then of course the budget must be agreed. How much should be set aside for this, and is it realistic? Can it be done with that budget, given the complexity of the project, given the nature of the project? So a realistic budget must be allocated. It should not be excessive, but it should not be underdone either. And there must be an end time. There must be an end date. If not, it will drag on for ages. It will drag on forever. So there must be a completion date. The project manager and the various people working on the project, they must know that this will end at a particular time. That this particular cycle, at least, if it's an ongoing project, they must have it in cycles, and it must be completed by a certain date. They must have a target, and they must try to achieve that target. Then there should be a schedule and a project plan. It's important that all the resources are scheduled, and as to when they're going to arrive, who's going to work on what, where the job will be done, what machinery, what inputs are required. There must be a plan and a schedule. It must be detailed and it must be logical. It should be planned in a way that means that there are no hold-ups, and there are no clashes. There is no situation where the project, two parts of the project require the same machine at the same moment in time. It should be logical and sequential, one following on from the other. Team members, who will be involved in the project, and what are their responsibilities? This means all the team, right throughout, from start to finish. Name the team and what are their roles precisely, and make sure that they have the training, the ability, the skills to deliver on their responsibilities. There are no excuses at the end. In other words, the team is adequate for the purpose that it's been given. And how will performance be monitored and controlled? Will it be controlled by the project manager or by outside managers who were brought in to check tolerances, check design, check progress? How will it be monitored? Who will do the monitoring? And if there are variations in what was expected, who will control it? Who will make the amendments? Who will make the changes? What's the mechanism to alter the project if it's deemed necessary when they're doing it in practice? If there's a variation from the plan, why is there a variation from the plan? What caused it, and what can be done? What remedial action can be taken to put the project back on course? Now all of this has to fit into the project charter. So you can see the project charter is not just authorizing the project, it's quite a detailed statement. The project scope is setting out all the sequences and the plans for how it's going to be done and who's going to do it and what the project's about. The project scope is setting out the limits of the project, what can be done. The charter is specifying in a much more detailed way who owns the project, how it's going to be looked after, how it's going to be delivered, is it feasible, and so on. And it should really hit these 12 points we've got on the slide now. So those are some of the issues involved in the project initiation process. When a project is just about to be set up, this is the starting point, and these are the issues that should be considered. And that's all we're going to deal with here, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.